Father, Mother God, we give thanks for the opportunity to acknowledge your presence in our lives, right here, right now. As we breathe into this moment and feel your love embrace us, move through us. Move into this moment, touching each and every one. We bring to mind the tragic incident of last Sunday. We hold each and every one. We see them embraced by your love. We see them lifted. We see them healed. And we hold the families of those who were killed, the families of those who were injured, and the families of those who were traumatized. We see those families embraced by your love, by your peace. We see those families lifted by the understanding that is offered to them through the Christ in each of them. We give thanks that this healing energy that you offer to each and every one of us, each and every moment, is available, always. And as ministers of your word, each and every one of us moves through our lives, realizing your presence, expressing your love. And for this opportunity to be ministers of your word, we give thanks. And so it is that together we say, Amen. Well, make me an instrument. You all likely know of the poem of St. Francis. And that poem is a poem about being that minister, being that presence in other people's lives. We're undertaking a period of healing, and many of us have been on that path of healing, and many of us have healed. I would not say that I'm one of those, but I'm working on it. And we have this opportunity to heal because of that expression of love of God, that unconditional love of God that is always available to us. It permeates us. It comes through us into each and every moment if we let it. It's not a matter of conjuring up something that is not there, but rather it is opening ourselves to the flow that is available to us. And that flow is available to each and every person. There is no exclusions in who can experience and express that unconditional love. Well, we began this talk series last week, and I talked about the 11 nations in the North American continent. We have this thing that we think that there is a set of American values, and we talk about American values without being explicit about what those are, thinking that everybody knows what those are. But as I introduced last week, uh, America is really made up of 11 nations. And those 11 nations are the result of the founding fathers and mothers of these areas. We talked about, and I'm not going to go through this again, but just be aware that there is a predominant set of values that exist in each of these areas of the U.S. And we look at those values as the values of Yankeedom being advancing the community good, proselytizing, investing heavily in public institutions, New Netherlands, which is basically around New York, honoring cultural diversity, commerce, and government-funded infrastructure. The left coast, which obviously is well, it's on the left coast. It's basically from mid-California north, advancing the public good and honoring cultural diversity. Tidewater, which is the Virginia area and west, a focus on aristocracy rather than equality, a disinterest in public participation in politics. This area was founded primarily by the second sons, the third sons, the fourth sons of British aristocracy. As you know, British aristocracy hands down the family wealth to the first son. And so the second son, third son, fourth son felt, well, frankly, that they needed to go somewhere to make their own way. The Deep South, which was founded primarily by the Barbados slave owners, and so that idea came into the Deep South. Appalachia was founded by the Scottish and Irish that were in continual battle with the English, and so they have this combative nature towards authority. They're skeptical of community investment in infrastructure and social engineering. In the Midlands, the live and let live mentality. The El Norte, those were that was titled El Norte, meaning the Northerners from Mexico, and it occupies, as you see in this map, it occupies this area down here. We have the far west being the last of the area to be developed, and that's primarily because the agricultural opportunities that were present in the Midwest and the East were not available in the far west because of the terrain and the climate. At 12 inches per year, it hardly supports a cotton crop. And then we have the New France and the First Nations. The First Nations, actually that boundary of the First Nations was pushed north. Now it includes primarily the Inuit and the Native Americans of the northern continent, and New France being the Montreal area and Louisiana. So we have these values that you'll see that there is a substantial amount of contradiction between the values that are held by each of these nations. And so it is difficult for us to talk about American values with any kind of clarity, with any kind of distinction. And so when we talk about, we hold American values, well, do we hold American values that is interested in cultural diversity, or that is interested in proselytizing? You see, the people that came into Yankeedom were primarily the Puritans, and that value structure of the Puritans was that this is the only God, this is what you need to believe, and so there was that proselytizing activity. Whereas in New Netherlands, that was a melting pot. That's really where the melting pot that we talk about in America, that's where the melting pot first occurred, because the New Netherlands was interested in commerce, so they were connecting with people all across the Atlantic. So there was a good deal of cultural diversity there. So the point is that we do not have a set of American values. We have values that each of us hold, and we can identify those values with other people who hold those similar values, but those values really are a determination of our worldview. And it is our worldviews that, the diversity of our worldviews, that is the basis of our differences of opinion. Okay? So if we're going to be healing, what we need to do is we need to acknowledge that there are many different worldviews that are present here in our American culture, and that when we talk with another person, we may be talking with someone of a very different set, a very different worldview and set of values. So in this healing process, and this is a healing of the individual as well as a healing of the social fabric, that when we heal individually, what we're doing is we're bringing that healing consciousness into the social fabric. We are mending the social fabric. And so this practice of healing that we're talking about is not just an individual healing, but a healing of our society as a whole. And I think that most people here would agree that our society needs a healing, needs several healings perhaps. But healing is what we individually must undertake. We can't heal somebody else, right? I mean, we can only heal ourselves. And so this practice of healing, as it relates to the social good, the social fabric, is really a path through the individual healing. Last week, I suggested that, and we were talking about exclusivity. Exclusivity is really the basis of, or exclusivity is the result of our holding these various values. For instance, if we are on the left coast and we adopt the values of the left coast, where we are very focused on advancing the public good and cultural diversity, how does someone who has those values communicate with someone who grew up in the Deep South, where there is a value set that is oriented to extreme elitism? Okay? How do you communicate with someone who is holding a different worldview than you? Because those worldviews are going to be, they're going to affect your assumptions. They're going to affect your goals. They're going to affect just about every part of how you live your life. So this diversity of values is the basis for our desire to exclude certain people or certain groups of people from your life. Facebook is an excellent example. It's got this wonderful tool of exclusion called unfriending. Or if you don't want to go quite that far, you can block somebody, right? It's kind of a body check in consciousness. So we have these tools in our society which allow us to implement our exclusions, implement our exclusivity. So last week I asked you to think about those things that you're excluding from your life. Would you like to share? I'm not looking for specific individuals. I don't need to know who you are specifically excluding from your life, but I'm curious about what you came up with as you were thinking about that. Were there specific individuals that you would exclude from your life? I know I had identified a couple of people that frankly I would not like to be involved with. Categories of people? Maybe people from the Deep South. I don't know. You know, what did you come up with as you were exploring this item, this question of what do you exclude from your life? Joanne? Okay. Can you give me an example of what you would consider to be extreme hypocrisy? I'll come back to you. No, don't give me a name, but okay, good example. All right. Yes. Politicians on the far right. Okay. All right. And I don't need to ask for any examples there. I don't know. Does anyone here need to have examples from Peggy? Okay. Chris? Okay. Yeah. Oh, I can identify with that. Actually, I can identify with both sides of that. Okay. Glenn. Okay. Floyd. Okay. All right. Rose. Okay. The drama queens. Yeah. Okay. All right. Is somebody taking notes? I'd like to add this to my. Or anything else that you came up with? All right. So this set of exclusives that we have come up with in our own lives is really the root of our suffering. Sharif Abdullah, who was here a couple of weeks ago, he offers us this. Exclusivity is the root of all our human maladies. It allows us not only to separate from others, but also to oppress them. Racism, sexism, homophobia, slavery, all forms of hatred and bigotry stem from the notion, I am separate from you, by virtue of skin color, ethnicity, behavior, belief, whatever. But as we exclude others, what are we doing? We're setting ourselves up to be violated. We're setting ourselves up to be violated if those excluded somehow impinge upon our lives, right? And that violation becomes the basis of our suffering. And it may be just a little irritation, or it may be a frustration, or it may be road rage, or it may be an ex-partner that you had an acrimonious separation from, or it could be a workmate. It could be someone that an old boss, right, that fired you. I had 5 of those. But so it could be anyone that is in your list of, I don't want to ever see this person again. I don't want to talk to this person. I don't want to interact with this person. That's the basis of our suffering, is the exclusives in our lives. So if we recognize exclusion as the basis of our suffering, then what is the basis of our healing? Inclusion. Inclusivity is the basis of our healing. And so as we acknowledge that inclusivity is a necessary aspect of our healing, then we start to look at the solution rather than the problem, right? And looking at the solution from a spiritual perspective, looking at the solution, intention is, of course, important. Intention is important, but it's not the fullness of the solution. Intention is important, but action is essential. As we look at inclusivity, Abdullah offers also this. The essence of all inclusive spiritual practice can be summed up in what Jesus is said to have called the second great commandment. Thou shalt love your neighbor as thyself. By neighbors, he did not mean merely those people who live close to you, but everyone with whom you have contact. And I would expand that to say everyone, even if you don't have contact. Everyone who is a potential contact. Everybody who would impinge in your thought stream. And so we may not have contact with the dude who had 12 bump stocks on his arsenal of assault weapons. But that person impinges upon our consciousness, right? Now this is a tough one. This is perhaps the toughest part of the spiritual practice, and that is to include even those who are absolutely abhorrent to us, who absolutely have no shared values with us. So as we think of the tragedy last week, do we exclude the shooter from our prayers? You know, as I was offering the opening prayer, I was about to say including the shooter, but I did not want to put you off. But at the same time, I would like you to acknowledge that the shooter is an exclusion for you. And if you're going to allow that one exclusion, then healing is not possible. I know that's an extreme position that I'm stating here. But as long as there is one exclusion, your healing is not possible. So the question becomes, how engaged am I? How committed am I to the healing? How committed am I to my own healing? My own healing is part and parcel of the healing of the fabric of our society. We may be only one thread. Have you ever noticed on a trampoline, the mat of the trampoline is really made up of individual fibers, right? And in fact, what seems to be one thread going through is actually multiple threads that are wound together, and those are woven. Well, I picked up a free trampoline through Next Door Neighbor online. This was a couple of years ago, and I went there, saw it, all assembled, and the fellow says, "It's yours. All you need to do is just get it out of here." And obviously, getting out a 12-foot trampoline, out the door, I couldn't put it on the top of my car. I couldn't lift it up on the top of my car. So I got it home, and I reassembled it, got it all level and everything, and I got on it, and I started bouncing. Yeah, it works. And I looked down, and there was one spot on that 12-foot diameter circle, one spot where there was frayed thread. And that frayed thread bothered me. I couldn't stand it. I had to fix it, right? Well, that one thread was what needed to be healed for that trampoline mat. It's a great shaped trampoline. I went and got some hot glue, and I sandwiched the thread, got hot glue in there, and got that taken care of so that it won't fray anymore. Well, that one thread is like our consciousness, where we have the shooter in Las Vegas being that one thread in our consciousness that is frayed, that one thread that needs to be healed. But now that I have fixed that one thread in the trampoline, I know that that trampoline is good to go for a number of years. It's not going to fray anymore. If it does fray, I'll see it, and I'll get some hot glue, and I'll get that fixed so that it doesn't ruin the mat. That's the practice that we have, is identifying that one thread that we need to heal. Even if we think, oh, I'm good. Everybody is an inclusive part of my consciousness, except maybe that one thread. Well, so practicing inclusivity is an important aspect of this whole healing process. Inclusivity means we can experience connection, interaction, and community with everyone, including potential adversaries, and have meaningful interactions with them. Not just how's the weather, but how's your life? How are you experiencing life? What are your frustrations? What are the things where you would like my help? How can we together help you do whatever, right? How can I, as a potential adversary of yours, how can I become a collaborator rather than an adversary? How can I be part of your life in a meaningful, positive way? Are we willing to make that step? That's really what this spiritual practice of healing is about, is stepping into the role of our adversary and understand and connect meaningfully with our adversary. So, as Abdullah describes this healing process, he's taken this, there are 9 topics here, and he's taken these 9 topics from the Tibetan Book of the Living and Dying, which is written by Chinogul Rinpoche. And these include, as we work with our adversary, perhaps initially in mind, but eventually in person, as we work with our adversary, it is important for us to establish an unafraid, heartfelt communication with the other. And it may be that we would not have the opportunity to speak with the shooter in Las Vegas. It could be that we will never have that opportunity because, well, what? He's dead. But in our own mind, how would we establish that communication? How would we establish that connection? Relax any tension in the atmosphere. Be natural, relaxed. Let yourself shine. That's uppercase self. Let your Christ light shine through. Encourage the other to feel free to express thoughts, fears, and emotions. Now that's going to be a difficult step. If you're one-on-one with the individual, if that person recognizes you as an adversary, maybe it's not in your own mind, but that person really does see you as an adversary. How do you do that? It's important for you to recognize that if you're going to have a healed relationship, that relationship needs to be based upon a fearless interaction. Do not interrupt, deny, or diminish what the other is saying. In all grave situations, 2 things are essential: common sense and humor. And you may have, someone may have plowed into your rear end, right? I was going north on Wadsworth several years ago, back in 2011, 2012. And you may be familiar with that stoplight, kind of in the gully at 84th. I think it's Pomona Drive, but it's 8400 block. Well, I was coming down, and I was in the left-hand lane. I was coming down to the stoplight, and it turned yellow, and I was thinking about going through it, but I said, no, I better stop. So I slammed on the brakes. Someone behind me, as I was slamming on the brakes, I looked in my rearview mirror, and oh no, the person is looking down at the seat between, I could see that she wasn't seeing that I was stopping. And I just went ahead and stopped and braced myself, and sure enough, she hit the back of the car. Well, I got out, and I went over and talked to her, see how she was doing. It turns out it was an older lady, about my age now, but that was back 5 years ago. And so she had just right on the verge of tears. She was so sorry that she had hit me, and she was sorry not only because it damaged my car, and let's be frank, that car, it was difficult to damage that car any more than it. But she was concerned that it damaged my car, but she was also fearful that her daughter was going to take her keys away. When she said that to me, I understood. You know, I was almost to cry with her, because just the other day I was thinking, anybody that tries to take my keys away, they'd be better be ready for a fight. Mobility is such an important aspect of our culture, right? And I remember when we took the keys away from my mom, it turns out she was ready to let go of them, but nonetheless, she was expressing this grave concern that now I won't have any freedom. Yeah, I can appreciate that. Two things are essential: common sense and humor. And I don't remember what it was, as I said to her, but I was trying to lift the situation. Yeah, my car got damaged. Yeah, her car got damaged. Yes, she was the one that wasn't paying attention, but that really didn't make any difference. She was fearful of her freedom. And I knew that my insurance was going to take care of it. It turns out that I came out ahead because they decided to total the car, and then they sold it back to me at a substantially reduced price. So I came out ahead. I don't know whether her daughter took her keys away from her, but anyway, the situation turned on my willingness to be light about it. Do not attempt to rescue someone else's beliefs or values held. We are not rescuers in our healing process, right? It is not up to us to show someone else why their beliefs are so screwed up. It is not up to us to ensure that they are going to have a delightful life. What it is up to us is that we are not going to try to diminish or deny their worldview. Just understand it. Do not expect too much of yourself or miraculous results, right? You may have an adversary that you've had for months or years, and it's not going to be up to you to heal that relationship. All you can do is heal your own perspective on that relationship. Michael. From one's perspective, from my perspective of your values, I can see how your values may be a detriment to your life, and so it's not up to me. Yeah, that's right. Okay, but thank you. You know, this is good. I appreciate that. Be determined to see the other in terms of their own life. Be willing to acknowledge that they have a different set of values, they have a different worldview. And be willing to step into that worldview. You don't have to accept that worldview. You don't have to integrate those values into your set of values, but be willing to acknowledge that they have their own set of values that are driving their own life. Whether they are paying attention to those values or not, they may have a stated set of values. Okay, these are my values, and they may be behaving over here. But it's not up to us to show them how those are different, and it's not up to us to be concerned about that difference, but rather to be willing to acknowledge that their worldview is valid. May not be correct, but it is valid. Okay? correctness is really in our own view, right? And then the other. See the other as someone just like you, with the same desire to be happy and to avoid suffering, with the same loneliness, the same fear of the unknown, the same secret areas of sadness. They may not be your areas of sadness, but they have secret areas of sadness, and be willing to acknowledge that that is so. And then the same half acknowledged, perhaps, feelings of helplessness. Don't we all, if we are true, honest with ourselves, don't we all have those areas of sadness, those areas of loneliness, those feelings of helplessness? Maybe not all the time, but we have those from time to time. I was speaking on Facebook. For those of you who are new, I use Facebook a lot, okay? I acknowledge I'm addicted to Facebook. But it turns out that the first girlfriend of my older brother, Nolene, I won't mention her last name. I doubt that anyone knows her, but nonetheless, she messaged me about 2 weeks ago. I was delighted to hear from her because my older brother, 6 years older, he had this girlfriend, Nolene, that frankly, as an 11-year-old, 12-year-old, 13-year-old, I was in love with, okay? I admit it. I was in love with this girl. And so she messaged me, and it was delightful to hear her again, to be in contact with her again. And we just had a few messages back and forth. How's your life? What's going on? That sort of thing. She asked about my brother, and I told her about his 4 marriages, and I told about his current cancer thing, and she acknowledged that, well, she also had cancer, breast cancer, back in 2006. She is now dealing with a chronic lymphoma, and that she also went through 4 marriages, and that she is lonely now. She's alone, and she is lonely. And so I got to connect with her again at the heart level. Yeah, just instant messaging, right? I mean, it's kind of a surface level of communication. But we were able to connect again and see that we are sharing these kinds of same things. Turns out her worldview and my worldview are very similar. My brother's worldview is very different. And I didn't bring that up with her. I preferred to just let her think that, well, Gary was Gary, and he still is Gary. And he still is Gary, but he has a very different worldview than when he knew her. And so it's important for us to recognize that we can acknowledge another's worldview, another set of values as valid, and it is key to our being able to connect with them. So, one of my favorite spiritual teachers, Eknath Warren, he stated that our greatest strength lies not in how much we differ from each other, but in how very much we are the same. Think about that. Think about that. We are all a community of beings that are presently human. We are all from that rootstock of, maybe it was a transplanetary spermia that seeded this planet. Maybe it was just a set of unique chemical conditions that allowed that first aggregation of chemicals to form a cell and the evolution from that cell. Whatever it is, we share a common heritage. And it is a very deep and very real heritage that we share. And we have grown into these blossoms of expression that are rooted in various soils. But like the soils that grow in the fertile soil, or like the soils that are fertile and the soil that is trodden by the footpath, the soils that are acidic and the soils that are alkaline. We grow out of these various soils, these various sets of values and worldviews. But we are all still sharing this desire for happiness, this avoidance of suffering. We share this opportunity to be ecstatic and these opportunities to be depressed. We share this common experience of sadness that may be from a personal tragedy, such as the tragedies in that 22,000 people crowd in Las Vegas. Perhaps it's a private tragedy that we have experienced. But we all have these aspects of our lives that we can relate to, regardless of the values and regardless of the worldviews. Let us get past those values, get past those worldviews, and acknowledge the humanness of each and every one of us. Recognize that each and every one of us is an experience, a set of experiences that is, if we knew the experiences of each and every one around us, we would be celebrating for their survival, celebrating for their happiness, celebrating for their successes, celebrating in those things that seem to bring them down. But as we form this community of human beings and relate one to the other, we are healed. Ekna says, Warren also offered us a rewrite, easy for me to say, a rewrite of the prayer of St. Francis. Now, as we read through this, and we'll do this during meditation, but as we read through this, you'll recognize, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I shall not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in the giving that we receive, it is in the pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in the dying to the separate self that we are born to eternal life. That was his change. Dying to the separate self. Because it is in our acknowledgement of the oneness of our humanity that is the key to our healing. We'll have our meditation. And as we come into our meditation, as we allow ourselves to rest in this moment, to let go of the baggage of the last hour, to let go of the baggage of the last week, to let go of our list of exclusions in our lives, and adopt these words. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Feel how that request shifts consciousness. Make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow unconditional love. The love that moves through you, into me, and through me at my choice into this moment. Allow me to be the conduit of that love. Where there is despair, let me sow hope. Let me allow my words and my actions to encourage and lift those around me. Where there is darkness, light. Let your love moving through me illuminate this ground of being Let your love illuminate the dark corners of this moment. Where there is sadness, joy. Let my expression of your love be the expression of joy in this world. Let my countenance reflect the love that I experience by offering your love into this moment unconditionally. Let me be the instrument of your peace. Let me step into this moment confident of the presence of your love, confident of the supply of your love, that I can give your love away. I can give your love unconditionally in every circumstance, knowing full well that your love will be there for me as I live, as I breathe, as I am you in this moment. I strive to be the expression of you in this moment, that I may heal myself and in this awareness of the conduit of your love in this moment, we come back to this time and space, sharing the words of the Lord's Prayer.